The morning sun shone brightly over London as Officer Michael Thompson adjusted his red uniform one last time before taking his position. He was 28 years old and had been working as a Royal Guard for 5 years. Every single day he felt proud to wear the famous red coat and tall black hat that made him instantly recognizable around the world. Today felt like any other Tuesday morning at Buckingham Palace, but something special was in the air. Michael had woken up at 5 in the morning, just like every other day. He ate his breakfast slowly while reading the newspaper. The weather report said it would be sunny and warm, which meant more tourists would come to see the palace. He liked seeing families from different countries taking pictures and smiling. It made him feel good about his job protecting the royal family. After breakfast, Michael drove to the palace and went through his daily routine. He polished his black boots until they shined like mirrors. He brushed his red uniform jacket carefully to remove every tiny piece of dust or lint. His brass buttons gleamed in the light. The other guards always joked that Michael was the most careful about his appearance, but he took it as a compliment. He believed that if you were going to represent the Queen and the country, you should look perfect. The palace gates opened to tourists at 9 in the morning. Michael took his position outside the main entrance where thousands of people would walk by during his shift. He stood perfectly straight with his rifle held at exactly the right angle. His feet were positioned precisely as he had been taught in training. His face showed no expression at all. This was what people expected from a royal guard, and Michael was determined to give them exactly what they came to see. Within an hour, the first groups of tourists began arriving. Michael could hear different languages being spoken around him. There were families with children who pointed at him with excitement. Some teenagers tried to make him laugh by making funny faces, but Michael never moved a muscle. He had trained for years to ignore distractions and stay completely still, no matter what happened around him. An elderly couple from America asked their daughter to take a picture of them standing next to Michael. The woman whispered that she thought the guards were the most professional soldiers she had ever seen. Michael felt proud inside, but his face remained completely blank. A group of school children walked by with their teacher, who explained how the royal guards protected the palace 24 hours a day every single day of the year. The morning passed peacefully. Michael watched the crowds grow larger as more tour buses arrived. Street performers played music nearby, and the sound of cameras clicking never stopped. Everything was normal and exactly as it should be. The pigeons walked around looking for dropped food. The police officers chatted with tourists and gave directions. Even the weather was perfect with just enough breeze to keep everyone comfortable. Michael had no way of knowing that somewhere in the crowd, a man was watching him very carefully. This man had been walking around the palace for almost an hour looking angry and nervous. Other tourists noticed him acting strange, but nobody thought he would actually do anything dangerous. The man kept touching a small bag he was carrying and staring at Michael with an expression that was getting more and more hostile. As the clock moved toward noon, Michael continued standing perfectly still. His training had taught him to notice everything around him while appearing to notice nothing at all. He was aware of the growing crowd and the beautiful weather and the happy sounds of families enjoying their visit to London. But he had no idea that this perfect morning was about to become the most challenging moment of his entire career as a royal guard. The peaceful scene was about to change in a way that nobody could have predicted. James Harrison stood at the edge of the crowd, feeling his heart beat faster and faster. He was 34 years old and had not worked for 6 months since losing his job at the factory. Every morning he woke up angry at the world, and today that anger had reached a breaking point. He carried a small cloth bag in his right hand that contained something he had been planning to use for weeks. James had been walking around Buckingham Palace since 8 in the morning. He watched the tourists taking happy pictures and listening to tour guides tell stories about the royal family. All of this made him even more angry. He saw people spending money on souvenirs while he could barely pay for food. He watched families laughing together while he felt completely alone in the world. The royal guard standing so perfectly still made James especially furious. Here was a man who got paid to just stand there and do nothing while James could not find work anywhere. The red uniform and shiny buttons seemed to mock him. The guard looked so clean and proper, while James wore old clothes that had holes in them. Everything about the situation felt unfair to James. For the past 3 weeks, James had been thinking about what he called his protest against the system. He had filled his small bag with dust and dirt from a construction site near his apartment. The dust was gray and thick and would make a terrible mess when thrown. James thought this would be the perfect way to show everyone how he felt about people who had easy jobs while others suffered. James moved closer to the guard post step by step. His hands were shaking and sweat was running down his face, even though the weather was not very hot. Other tourists started to notice him because he was acting so strange. A woman from Germany pointed him out to her husband, saying that the man looked very upset about something. A security guard near the palace entrance also noticed James, but thought he was just another tourist who was excited to see the royal guards. The bag of dust felt heavy in James' hand as he got closer and closer to Officer Thompson. James had practiced this moment many times in his mind. He would run up to the guard, throw the dust all over his perfect uniform, and then shout about how unfair life was for regular people. He imagined the guard would have to break his pose, and everyone would see that these famous soldiers were just regular people like everyone else. James stopped about 10 feet away from Michael and stared at him for several minutes. He was looking for any sign that the guard noticed him, but Michael's face remained completely blank. This made James even more angry because he felt like he was being ignored just like everywhere else in his life. He gripped the bag tighter and took 3 deep breaths to build up his courage. A group of children walked between James and the guard post. Their teacher was explaining how the guards were trained to never move no matter what happened around them. She said they were like living statues who took their job very seriously. The children giggled and tried to think of ways to make the guard smile or laugh. James listened to this and felt his anger reach the highest point it had ever been. The moment had come. James could not wait any longer, or he might lose his nerve completely. He looked around and saw that dozens of people had cameras and phones pointed at the guard. This was perfect because everyone would see what he was about to do. His protest would be recorded and maybe shown on the news. Finally, someone would pay attention to his problems and his anger. James took one last deep breath and prepared to rush forward toward Officer Thompson with his bag of dust ready to throw. James Harrison rushed forward with his bag of dust held high above his head. His feet moved quickly across the stone pavement as tourists jumped out of his way in surprise. Some people screamed when they saw the angry man running toward the royal guard. Children started crying, and parents pulled them back to safety. In just 3 seconds, everything changed from peaceful to complete chaos. Officer Michael Thompson saw James coming toward him, but his training told him to stay perfectly still. Royal guards were taught to ignore all distractions and never break their position no matter what happened. Michael had practiced this hundreds of times during his 5 years of service. He had stayed still during thunderstorms and snow, and even when birds landed on his hat. But nothing had prepared him for what was about to happen. James reached Michael and threw the entire contents of his bag directly into the guard's face. A huge cloud of thick gray dust exploded around Michael's head and shoulders. The dust was so thick that people nearby could not see Michael for several seconds. When the dust cloud began to settle, everyone could see that the Royal Guard's perfect red uniform was now covered in gray dirt and debris. The dust got into Michael's eyes, immediately making them water and burn. He could taste the gritty dirt in his mouth and feel it going up his nose with every breath. His throat started to hurt, and he wanted to cough very badly. The dust was not just regular dirt but construction dust, mixed with cement powder and other materials that made it even more uncomfortable. Michael felt like his face was on fire, but he did not move even one muscle. Tourists who saw the attack happen could not believe what they were seeing. A woman from France started screaming and pointed at James while calling for help. An elderly man from Canada tried to grab James, but the attacker was already running away through the crowd. 3 security guards who were stationed nearby immediately started chasing James through the groups of shocked tourists. The dust continued to fall from Michael's hat and shoulders like gray snow. His beautiful red uniform that he had polished so carefully that morning was now completely ruined. Dust covered his brass buttons and filled the creases in his jacket. His black boots were no longer shiny and his white gloves were gray with dirt. He looked like he had been working in a construction site instead of guarding a palace. People with cameras and phones had recorded the entire attack. Within seconds, videos of the incident were being uploaded to social media websites. The footage showed James running forward, throwing the dust, and then the cloud of gray powder covering the guard. But what happened next would become the most important part of the whole story. As the dust settled and people could see Michael clearly again, something amazing became obvious to everyone watching. Despite having dust all over his face and uniform, despite his eyes watering, and his throat burning, despite being attacked and humiliated in front of hundreds of people, Michael Thompson remained standing in exactly the same position as before. He had not moved his feet or his hands, or even turned his head. His rifle was still held at precisely the right angle. The crowd began to realize they were witnessing something incredible. This was not just a soldier doing his job. This was a man showing a level of self-control and dedication that most people had never seen before. Even though he had been attacked and covered in dust, Michael continued to stare straight ahead, as if nothing at all had happened. Security guards caught James Harrison and were dragging him away in handcuffs, but everyone kept looking back at the dust-covered guard, who stood like a statue despite everything that had just happened to him. The silence that followed the attack was broken only by the sound of cameras clicking and people whispering in amazement. Officer Michael Thompson stood covered in gray dust from head to toe, but his posture remained absolutely perfect. His feet were still positioned exactly as they had been before the attack. His shoulders were straight, and his head was held high. Even his facial expression had not changed at all. Michael could feel the dust burning his eyes and making them water constantly. Tears ran down his cheeks, but he did not wipe them away. The construction dust was making his throat feel raw and scratchy. Every breath he took made him want to cough, but he kept his mouth closed and continued breathing through his nose. His uniform felt heavy with all the dirt and dust that had settled into the fabric. The most difficult part was not the physical discomfort, but the feeling of being humiliated in front of so many people. Michael had always taken great pride in his appearance and his professionalism. Now he looked like he had been rolling around in a construction site, but his military training was stronger than his personal feelings. He had been taught that a royal guard must never break character no matter what challenges he faced. A little girl who was visiting with her family pointed at Michael and asked her mother why the soldier was not cleaning his face. Her mother explained that the guards were trained to stay very still and never move from their positions. The little girl thought this was amazing and asked if the guard was like a superhero. Her innocent question made several adults in the crowd smile despite the serious situation. More and more people began to gather around Michael's position. Word was spreading through the tourist groups that something incredible had happened. People who had been visiting other parts of the palace came to see the guard who had been attacked but refused to move. The crowd grew from about 50 people to more than 200 within 10 minutes. A news reporter who happened to be at the palace doing a story about tourism heard about the incident and rushed over with her camera crew. She could not believe what she was seeing. Here was a man who had been attacked and covered in dust, but continued to do his job, as if nothing had happened. She immediately began filming a live report about the incredible discipline of the British Royal Guard. Michael could hear people talking about him, but he could not make out most of the words because of the crowd noise. He heard cameras clicking constantly and knew that pictures of him covered in dust were being taken from every angle. Part of him felt embarrassed about how he looked, but a larger part felt proud that he was living up to the standards expected of a royal guard. The dust was beginning to dry on his uniform, making it feel stiff and uncomfortable. Some of it fell off when the wind blew, but most of it stayed stuck to the fabric. His hat was especially heavy with dust, and he could feel pieces of debris sliding down his neck inside his collar. Every few minutes more dust would fall from his hat onto his shoulders, but he never brushed it away. An elderly man who claimed to be a retired military officer approached one of the security guards and said he had never seen such an impressive display of discipline in his 40 years of service. He said most soldiers would have at least flinched or moved slightly when attacked, but this guard had not moved even 1 inch. The security guard agreed and said he was proud to work alongside such dedicated professionals. As the minutes passed, Michael felt his eyes adjusting to the irritation from the dust. His throat was still uncomfortable, but he was learning to breathe more carefully to avoid coughing. The physical challenges were becoming easier to manage, but the mental challenge of staying focused was getting harder as more people gathered and the noise level increased. The attack had happened at 11:30 in the morning, and by noon Michael had been standing in the same position covered in dust for 30 minutes. His shift was not scheduled to end until 2 in the afternoon, which meant he had to maintain his position for 2.5 more hours, while looking like he had been caught in a dust storm. Something beautiful began to happen as more people learned about what Officer Michael Thompson had done. The crowd that had gathered around his position started to change from curious onlookers to genuine admirers. People were no longer just taking pictures for fun, but were showing real respect for the incredible self-control they were witnessing. A man from Australia who had served in his country's military was the first person to start clapping. He began a slow, steady applause while looking directly at Michael with obvious respect. Other people in the crowd heard the clapping and turned to see what was happening. When they learned that the man was showing appreciation for the guard's discipline, they began clapping too. Within minutes, the applause spread through the entire crowd. More than 300 people were now gathered around Michael's position, and almost all of them were clapping their hands in appreciation. The sound echoed off the palace walls and could be heard from blocks away. Tourists who were visiting other parts of London heard the applause and came to see what was causing such excitement. A group of teenagers who had initially thought the whole situation was funny changed their attitude completely when they realized what they were seeing. One of them posted on social media that he had never seen anything so impressive in his entire life. He wrote that the Royal Guard was showing more strength and character than most people could ever imagine. His post was shared hundreds of times within the first hour. An elderly woman from Scotland approached one of the security guards and asked if she could somehow thank the dust-covered guard personally. The security guard explained that Royal Guards never break character while on duty, but that her appreciation was noticed and would be passed along to the proper authorities. The woman said she wanted to write a letter to the Queen herself to praise the guards' incredible behavior. Children in the crowd were especially fascinated by Michael's determination. A young boy asked his father why the guard did not wipe the dust off his face. His father explained that some jobs require people to follow rules even when it is difficult or uncomfortable. The boy said he wanted to be that strong when he grew up. His comment was overheard by other parents who nodded in agreement. The applause continued for more than 20 minutes. Every few minutes, new people would join the crowd and learn what had happened. When they heard the story of the attack and saw Michael still standing perfectly still despite being covered in dust, they too began clapping. The appreciation was genuine and heartfelt from people of all ages and from many different countries. News crews from 3 different television stations arrived at the palace after hearing reports about the incident. They interviewed people in the crowd who all said the same thing. They had never seen such an amazing display of professional dedication and self-control. One reporter said it was the most inspiring thing she had covered in her 10-year career. Social media posts about the incident began spreading around the world. People shared videos of Michael standing covered in dust while crowds applauded around him. The hashtag Royal Guard Hero started trending on multiple platforms. Comments came from people in dozens of countries, all expressing admiration for the British soldiers' incredible discipline. A tour guide who brought groups to the palace every day said she had never seen anything like the response Michael was receiving. Usually tourists took a few pictures of the guards and moved on to other attractions. But today people were staying for hours just to show their respect for what they had witnessed. She said it was like watching history being made. Michael could hear the applause and knew that people were showing appreciation for his actions, but he could not see most of the crowd because of his fixed position. He felt proud, but also somewhat overwhelmed by the attention. His training had prepared him to ignore distractions, but positive attention was actually harder to ignore than negative actions like the attack had been. The palace guards who were scheduled to replace Michael at the end of his shift began arriving early because they had heard about what happened. They wanted to see for themselves the guard who had become famous for his incredible self-control. When they saw Michael still standing perfectly still after more than 2 hours of being covered in dust, they felt proud to be part of the same organization. By 1 in the afternoon, the crowd had grown to more than 500 people. Police officers had to set up barriers to control the flow of tourists who kept arriving to see the famous dust-covered guard. Everyone wanted to witness what was being called the most impressive display of military discipline ever seen at Buckingham Palace. By 3 in the afternoon, videos of Officer Michael Thompson covered in dust have been viewed more than 5 million times across all social media platforms. The footage showed the exact moment when James Harrison threw the dust, and then the incredible sight of Michael continuing to stand perfectly still despite being completely covered in gray powder. Television news stations around the world picked up the story as their main headline. In America, the evening news programs all featured the incident, with hosts praising the British Royal Guard's amazing self-control. One news anchor said it was the most impressive display of professional discipline she had ever seen. Another called Michael a real-life example of what dedication to duty truly means. The British Broadcasting Corporation sent their best reporter to interview people who had witnessed the attack. Every single person said the same thing. They could not believe that someone could show such incredible self-control when faced with such a humiliating situation. A retired police officer said that most people would have at least wiped their face or stepped back, but Michael had not moved even one muscle. Social media experts said the story was spreading faster than almost any positive news story they had ever tracked. People were sharing the videos not just because they were dramatic, but because they showed something inspiring during a time when most news was negative. Comments on the posts came from teachers, soldiers, parents, and young people, all saying that Michael had given them hope about human character and dedication. International news channels in France, Germany, Japan, and Australia all ran the story as their lead item. Foreign correspondents interviewed their own military experts who explained how difficult it would be to maintain such discipline under attack. A former French military officer said that even their most elite soldiers would find it challenging to show such complete self-control in similar circumstances. Talk shows and radio programs began inviting guests to discuss what the incident revealed about military training and personal character. A psychology professor explained that Michael's reaction required not just physical training but incredible mental strength. She said most people have natural reflexes that make them want to protect themselves when attacked, but Michael had overcome all of those basic human instincts. The hashtag Royal Guard Hero was now trending in more than 20 countries. People were not just sharing the original videos, but were creating their own posts about times when they had tried to show similar dedication in their own jobs and lives. Teachers shared stories about staying calm when students misbehaved. Nurses wrote about remaining professional during medical emergencies. The story was inspiring people in many different careers. Comedy shows and late-night television programs also picked up the story, but in a respectful way that praised Michael rather than making fun of him. One popular comedian said that if more people showed the same level of commitment to their jobs, the world would be a much better place. Even the jokes were affectionate and admiring rather than mean or critical. Newspaper websites crashed from too much traffic as people tried to read detailed articles about the incident. The most popular article was titled "The Guard Who Would Not Break," and included interviews with military historians who compared Michael's actions to famous examples of soldiers showing courage under fire. They said his self-control was just as impressive as battlefield bravery. International military academies began using the incident as a teaching example. Instructors showed the videos to new recruits to demonstrate what true discipline looks like. A training sergeant in Canada said the footage was worth more than hours of lectures about maintaining composure under pressure. Students could see exactly what professional dedication meant in real life. The story reached people in countries where most citizens had never heard of the British Royal Guards before. In places like Brazil, India, and South Africa, people were learning about the tradition and training that produced such incredible self-control. Cultural differences did not matter because everyone could understand and admire what Michael had accomplished. Major newspapers in London received hundreds of letters from readers praising Michael and asking how they could show their appreciation. Many people wanted to send him gifts or thank you cards. Others asked if there was a way to donate money to support the Royal Guards or their training programs. The response showed how much the story had touched people's hearts. Letters of support began arriving at Buckingham Palace the very next morning. The Postal Service had to bring special trucks to handle all the mail addressed to Officer Michael Thompson and the Royal Guards in general. People from every part of the United Kingdom and from around the world had written to express their admiration for Michael's incredible display of duty and self-control. An 8-year-old girl from Manchester wrote a letter in colored pencil saying that Michael was her new hero because he showed that being strong meant staying calm when bad things happened. A retired teacher from Edinburgh sent a long letter explaining how she planned to tell their grandchildren about Michael as an example of good character. A construction worker from Liverpool wrote that he had never respected soldiers before, but seeing Michael had changed his mind completely. Military veterans from all branches of the British Armed Forces wrote letters sharing their own stories of trying to maintain discipline during difficult situations. A former Royal Navy officer said that in 30 years of service he had never seen such an impressive example of staying focused under attack. An ex-Royal Air Force pilot wrote that Michael had shown the kind of mental toughness that was needed in the most dangerous combat situations. School teachers across Britain began using Michael's story in their classrooms to teach children about perseverance and doing the right thing even when it was difficult. A primary school teacher in Wales said her students were fascinated by the idea that someone could be so dedicated to their job that they would not move even when attacked. The children drew pictures of Michael in his dust-covered uniform and wrote essays about what his actions meant to them. The story sparked conversations in workplaces throughout the country about what it means to be professional and dedicated. Office workers talked about how they could show more commitment to their jobs. Shop owners discussed the importance of staying calm when dealing with difficult customers. Factory workers shared stories about times when they had to keep working despite problems or distractions. Politicians from all political parties praised Michael's conduct during debates in Parliament. The Prime Minister mentioned the incident during a speech about British values and said that Michael represented the best qualities of public service. Opposition leaders agreed that his actions showed the kind of character that made the nation proud. It was rare to see such universal agreement on any topic in politics. The royal family itself took notice of the incident through their official representatives. Palace officials released a statement expressing admiration for Michael's professionalism and dedication to duty. They said his actions reflected the high standards expected of all royal guards and that he had honored both his uniform and his country. The statement was read on television news programs and printed in newspapers worldwide. Military recruitment offices reported an increase in young people asking about joining the Royal Guards after seeing Michael's example. A recruitment officer in Birmingham said that several teenagers had come in asking how they could develop the same kind of self-control and dedication. They wanted to serve their country with the same level of honor that Michael had shown. Businesses began using Michael's story in their training programs to teach employees about customer service and professionalism. A hotel chain created a presentation about staying calm and focused even when dealing with difficult situations. A retail company used the incident as an example of how to maintain dignity and composure when facing challenging customers. Religious leaders from different faiths praised Michael during their sermons and services. They said his actions showed virtues like patience, discipline, and dedication that were important in all aspects of life. A vicar in Canterbury said that Michael had demonstrated how to respond to hatred with grace and to insults with dignity. His example was meaningful to people regardless of their religious beliefs. University professors began studying the incident as an example of exceptional human behavior. Psychology departments analyzed what mental processes allowed Michael to overcome natural reflexes and maintain such complete self-control. Military colleges examined his training and background to understand how such discipline was developed and maintained. Local communities organized events to honor not just Michael but all members of the military and police who served with dedication. A town in Yorkshire held a parade to thank public servants for their commitment to duty. A community centre in Northern Ireland created a display about local heroes, including Michael as an example of courage and professionalism. The incident brought people together across social and economic divisions. Wealthy business owners and working-class families all expressed the same admiration for Michael's character. People who disagreed about politics and social issues found common ground in respecting his incredible self-discipline. His actions had created a moment of unity during a time when the country often felt divided. Support groups for military families said that Michael's story had given them renewed pride in their loved one's service. They said it reminded everyone of the sacrifices and dedication required for military life. The story helped civilians understand and appreciate what soldiers did every day to protect their country and maintain important traditions. 3 weeks after the incident, Officer Michael Thompson finally agreed to speak with reporters about what had happened that day and how it had affected him personally. He met with journalists in a quiet room at the palace where he could speak honestly about the experience without the pressure of crowds and cameras surrounding him. Michael explained that the dust had caused more problems than most people realized. The construction powder had irritated his eyes so badly that he needed medical treatment after his shift ended. His doctor had to flush his eyes with special solution and give him drops to use for several days. The dust had also gotten deep into his lungs, causing him to cough for more than a week after the attack. The physical discomfort had been challenging, but Michael said the emotional impact was even more difficult to handle. He admitted that being attacked in such a public and humiliating way had made him feel vulnerable and violated. For several days after the incident, he had trouble sleeping because he kept thinking about what had happened. He wondered if he could have prevented the attack or responded differently. Michael revealed that in the seconds after James Harrison threw the dust, he had faced the biggest test of his military career. Every natural instinct in his body told him to wipe his face, move away from his position, or at least blink to clear his eyes. His throat burned, and he desperately wanted to cough. The dust made his skin itch terribly, but he could not scratch or brush it away. The decision to remain perfectly still had not been automatic or easy. Michael explained that he had to make a conscious choice every single second for the next 2.5 hours. He had to tell himself over and over again to stay focused on his duty and ignore the discomfort. Sometimes he counted to 10 in his mind to get through particularly difficult moments when the urge to move was almost overwhelming. Michael talked about his military training and how it had prepared him for exactly this type of situation. During his basic training, instructors had created all kinds of distractions and discomforts to test the recruits' ability to maintain discipline. They had used loud noises, bright lights, and even thrown harmless objects to see who would break concentration. But Michael said nothing in training had been quite as challenging as the real attack. He described the mental techniques he used to stay focused during those difficult hours. Michael concentrated on his breathing and tried to think about why his job was important. He reminded himself that millions of people around the world looked up to the Royal Guards as symbols of strength and reliability. Breaking his pose would not just be a personal failure, but would disappoint everyone who believed in what the Guards represented. The hardest part, according to Michael, was hearing the crowd around him, but not being able to see most of what was happening. He could hear people talking about him, taking pictures, and sometimes applauding, but his fixed position meant he could only see straight ahead. He worried that people were making fun of how he looked covered in dust, but he later learned that almost everyone was showing respect and admiration. Michael admitted that he had moments of doubt during those hours when he wondered if maintaining his position was worth the discomfort and embarrassment. He thought about his family and friends and worried about what they would think when they saw pictures of him covered in gray powder. But each time these doubts came into his mind, he reminded himself of his oath as a Royal Guard and his commitment to excellence. The aftermath of the incident had been just as challenging as the event itself. Michael found himself famous around the world, which was something he had never wanted or expected. People recognized him on the street and asked for pictures or autographs. While he appreciated the support, he said the attention made him uncomfortable because he had just been doing his job as he was trained to do. Michael spoke about the personal growth that came from surviving such a difficult test. He said the experience had taught him that he was stronger than he had ever imagined. Knowing that he could maintain his composure and dedication even under attack had given him confidence that would help him in all areas of life. He felt proud not just of staying still, but of proving to himself what he was truly capable of achieving. He also talked about how the incident had changed his relationship with his fellow guards and his family. His colleagues treated him with even more respect, and his parents told him they had never been more proud of him. His girlfriend said that seeing how he handled the situation had made her love him even more, because it showed his true character under pressure. 6 months after the dust attack incident, Officer Michael Thompson's story continued to inspire people around the world in ways that nobody could have predicted. His moment of incredible self-control had grown into something much larger than anyone expected. The simple act of standing still, while covered in dust, had become a symbol of human strength and dedication that touched millions of lives. Military academies in 15 different countries added Michael's story to their official training programs. Instructors used the video footage to teach new recruits about the importance of maintaining discipline, even when facing unexpected challenges. A training officer at the United States Military Academy said the incident was now required viewing for all first-year students because it showed perfect example of what military bearing truly meant. The story became especially popular in schools where teachers used it to help children understand concepts like perseverance, self-control, and doing the right thing even when it was difficult. An elementary school teacher in Canada said her students talked about Michael whenever they faced challenges in their own lives. When they wanted to give up on difficult math problems or felt frustrated with other students, they would remember the guard who stayed strong despite being attacked. Businesses around the world began using Michael's example in their employee training programs. Companies taught workers about staying professional when dealing with angry customers or maintaining focus during stressful situations. A customer service manager in Australia said that when her employees felt overwhelmed, they would ask themselves what Michael would do, and it helped them stay calm and professional. Michael received hundreds of awards and honors from military organizations, government agencies, and civilian groups. He was invited to ceremonies in 12 different countries, where leaders praised his exceptional character and dedication to duty. However, in every speech Michael gave, he emphasized that he had simply been doing his job as he was trained to do. His humility in the face of international praise only made people admire him even more. The most unexpected result of the incident was what happened to James Harrison, the man who had thrown the dust. While serving his community service sentence, James received counseling that helped him understand his mental health problems. He eventually wrote a public letter apologizing to Michael and expressing amazement at how the guard had responded to his attack. James said that seeing Michael's incredible self-control had made him want to become a better person himself. Mental health organizations began using the incident to discuss how people respond differently to stress and challenges. Counselors explained that while James had responded to his problems with anger and violence, Michael had shown that it was possible to face difficulties with grace and strength. The contrast between their reactions became a teaching tool about healthy and unhealthy ways to handle life challenges. The tourism industry around Buckingham Palace experienced a huge increase in visitors who wanted to see where the famous incident had taken place. Tour guides added the story to their regular presentations, and the spot where Michael had stood became one of the most photographed locations at the palace. Visitors from around the world came specifically to see the place where such an inspiring example of human character had been displayed. Publishers released several books about the incident and about Royal Guard training in general. These books became bestsellers as people wanted to learn more about how soldiers developed such incredible discipline and dedication. The most popular book included interviews with Michael and other guards explaining their training methods and the mental approaches they used to maintain focus under pressure. Universities began studying the incident as an example of exceptional human performance under stress. Psychology departments analyzed what mental qualities allowed Michael to overcome natural reflexes and maintain complete composure. Sports psychologists used his techniques to help athletes stay focused during important competitions. The academic interest in his actions led to new research about self-control and mental toughness. Years later, Michael continued to receive letters from people around the world, telling him how his example had helped them in their own lives. Parents wrote about teaching their children to stay strong during difficult times. Students shared stories about not giving up when school became challenging. Workers explained how thinking about Michael helped them stay professional during tough days at their jobs.